I'd say, for your first job, don't be afraid to take a paid internship. Back in my day, they weren't all paid. Now most places they have to pay you. So take anything so you can get your foot in the door and get the experience, even if it isn't quite the job you want. Your first one, like, take it from me, is not always going to be your end all be all, but you'll always learn something from it.
Welcome to Momentum Now by MVP, a career-focused podcast that delves into the stories of seasoned professionals, charismatic leaders, and passionate catalysts. Join us as we explore their career achievements, the challenges they've overcome, and their advice for young professionals of color navigating a fulfilling career journey. Today, our co-hosts, Bob Brooks and Karen McFarland, speak with fashion and fragrance marketing expert Brittney Jackson Moseley. Brittney shares her career journey, the benefits of creating a personal advisory panel, and how to best use LinkedIn to build valuable business relationships and find the ideal new job.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Karen McFarland and I are very excited to have here our fragrance and beauty marketing expert, Brittney Jackson Moseley, Director of Integrated Marketing for Scentbird, a really interesting and inventive way for consumers to try different perfumes and colognes. It's really remarkable. She's graduated out of the University of Michigan, which is close to where I live in the Midwest. So that's exciting. I have another Midwesterner here. And we're just really excited to have you, Brittney. Thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And also go blue. Forever go blue. Gotta get my shout out.
Hi, Brittney. So good to see you.
So nice to see you.
I have a little bit of a connection to a different blue, though. When my son went to school, they had red team, blue team. So we're blue forever. So I feel like I'm part of the tribe.
There's lots of affiliations with blue. Clearly, just to be clear, mine is University of Michigan.
We've had a lot of debates.
Yes, Wolverines.
Brittney, I am so excited that you're here today, mostly because we've known each other for forever, right? And I feel like I know you, but I know I don't know everything about you. And so now I get to rediscover some elements about you that I don't think I know, but we get to rediscover them with the world. So first of all, I just wanted to talk a little bit about your journey into beauty and fragrance and makeup, right? Because it's a little bit non-traditional how you got here.
Very much so.
I know that part. So
yes. My journey, to your point, has been quite untraditional. Where do I even begin? When I graduated, my goal was to have a job and move to New York City, and be able to take care of myself, to be 100%. That was my goal, coming out of school. And, the economy wasn't great the few years prior. So I was just like, I don't want to be one of those millennial graduates who moves in immediately. Like, I want to move to New York. I want to learn. I want to experience. So, I just applied widely. And I really wanted a marketing job and a job where I can do something meaningful. And, I got some advice from, some of the students who are a little older than me that was like, take an internship out of college. Whatever you do, if it pays, just take it, get there and get your foot in the door and get some experience, because people are looking for experience. So I applied, and I have no idea why Return Path selected me. I did have a lot of internships and have always known I wanted to be a marketer, mostly because of my parents, but that's a story for another day, I guess. But I applied to some tech companies that I found interesting, as well as beauty companies, just as a shot in the dark. And I got an internship at a company called Return Path. And Karen was my first boss ever.
Nice.
So we know each other, so that's why we know each other.
That's how we know each other. So I entered the work.
Wait a second. I just want to interrupt you for a second, because you said you didn't know why. All right. I actually remember.
Why?
Wow. This is going to be one of those moments. This is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I have confidence in my skill set, lots of internships, being in marketing club, but, applying in New York was really competitive. So I really didn't know why. Please tell me.
Well, I was going through a rack of resumes and it was down to 2 resumes, right? And you actually, this is the thing, you had experience, right? Which is a big plus because when you are getting an intern, right, you're like, oh, this is a great opportunity for that person to get, to give back and give them some skills. But at the same time, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to oversee this person. So that's going to create work for me. So I have to admit, particularly back then, there was a bias towards people who had some, experience in the workplace. It wasn't brand new and fresh. And then got Brittney on the phone and she was just fabulous, right? Her personality, the way she talked about her experience, the way she could talk about her skills, all of those different things was like, okay, for a person like me who had limited time but really wanted to do this, right? It was really important for me to understand if Brittney's going to come in and be able to, grasp the business. It's a new business. So just be a learner, be a curious learner, which she demonstrated on the interview. And just be able to get in there and get some stuff done. And let me just tell you something. She did. She did.
I was ready to deliver. Again, I think that paranoia paid off. Thank you for telling me that because the older kids who are 2 years older than me, they were like, I came out, there were no jobs and everyone wanted someone with experience. So during my college years, I really made sure to have as many marketing jobs as possible. I had one during the year. I had, I worked for the Michigan Theater and I worked for free just so I can have experience on my resume and learn what it was like to be a part of a marketing team. And then my parents helped me get internships, even if it was working in the automotive industry or airplanes. I worked for an airplane engine manufacturer. I just really wanted experience because, I was made to be paranoid and it paid off.
Mm-hmm. Wait, did we pay you?
Yes, you did.
That's
okay,
great.
Good. I don't remember
that. Brittney, do you remember the interview with Karen?
I do. It was a phone interview and I was like, it felt like I knew Karen. And I was like, I'm just going to be myself. That's all I can
Fantastic.
be. And I knew, I had a pep talk with my parents, of course, at the time, early in my career. And they were like, make sure you talk about your skill set. And we practiced, right? And Karen asked a lot of great questions that made me think I would be able to actually contribute as opposed to, running errands, which is, everyone's got to get their foot in the door. But she asked me questions about, hey, can you write an email that sells? And, hey, have you heard of a blog? Like, hey, have you worked in social media? And it just made me think, oh my gosh, I might actually be able to do stuff and contribute. And that made me very excited. So the conversation flowed really easily. And yeah, that's Karen gave me my first shot. And then that job at Return Path turned into a full-time role, a full-time consulting role. And then, I was frank with Karen, I was like, I love what I'm learning here, but that was my dream to work in fragrance and beauty or fashion. That's why I came from Michigan to New York City. I really wanted to, be a part of some of the unique industries in New York City. And I ended up getting recruited into Chanel. That was like a dream. Again, it was because I had applied, out of college and I kept updating my resume in the system. Like, oh, well, now I've learned this skill and I've learned this skill. And, one of the things I learned at Return Path was the breadth of marketing work. And I was also starting to learn about creative project management, right? I started working closely with the creative team.
Yeah, that's
right. And that's how I got recruited into Chanel. They needed what we called back then a traffic manager or a project manager, at a junior level. And from there, I had many different roles, but I really wanted to be in marketing. So I've had in my early career, I had pieces of the job I wanted, the job I have today, but I never had the whole thing. So I just, that's why it's pretty non-traditional. A lot of people out of college, you get into one of the big fragrance or beauty brands, and you stay there and you move around and you bounce around. But I was having a really hard time after I moved from Chanel to another role that I thought would get me into marketing faster. A lot of, let me phrase this differently. So I was at Chanel and I was a project manager. So essentially I was getting things approved for the US market. So, it comes through the team in France, and I was in the creative team, and the projects would come to me. I'd give them to copywriters. I'd physically give folders to the creatives, get to the VP of creative, and they would approve things, right? So I was really like, okay, this is the brand I want to be at. And I was looking for growth opportunities, but, that company was very, very, very large organization, and I wasn't able to move into marketing. I just wasn't seeing how I would ever be able to get to that team, right? I kept asking the questions. Again, I'm an eager beaver where, what can I learn? How can I get into the department, and how can I move? And I just wasn't seeing it. So I ended up moving to an advertising agency and was recruited by someone from Return Path into the advertising agency. And
the gift that keeps on
giving gave me the next 2 jobs I had. So from that first risk I took in my career, it actually didn't end up being a risk because there was always someone there who had moved on who would bring me with them. And I've still kept in touch with all of those people. So after I moved from the advertising agency, I was still in the project management space. So again, how can I get into marketing? I've got the industry right. Advertising is an exciting place. I learned about that business. I was helping them with new business initiatives as well. So I was doing a little bit of marketing, but I'm like, maybe I just need to be a marketer. There's probably, no way I will get into one of the big, it's too late for me. Right. Like the Estee Lauders, the L'Oreals of the world. And, I kept getting close in interviews, but a lot of times, honestly, they would, hire internally, or that was the feedback I was getting. So I ended up moving to a tech company. Again, Return Path, the gift that keeps on giving, someone who Karen introduced me to, who worked for Return Path before I got there. They needed a marketing manager. So that was my chance to level up and get the marketing manager title. And the work I realized like that's what I wanted to do, regardless of industry. How do I package things the right way so that a customer can really get the core benefits of a product, and leveraging all of the new media opportunities there were to drive demand for a product. And that's where I got to next. SmartLink.
So you were basically you've created a network of individuals, and you leverage that network to advance your career from position to job to position.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now at Scentbird? And also tell us more about that network and personal advisory panel that you continue to leverage as well.
Yes, absolutely. Karen is definitely on that advisory panel. And from, that first job, I was like, too late, you're on the panel. And I made it clear to her that I would be coming back. When someone, I realized early on that when someone takes an interest in you and your growth, you should keep that person around, right? You should, touch base with them. So it started with Karen, and then she also, gave me that advice, right? Stay in touch with people. Who is your advisory panel? That's something she said to me, like, who helps you make decisions, and do you have people in marketing that can help you do that? So one way is I would set a little calendar alert and at least probably quarterly, because I didn't want to be annoying. I would either reach out on LinkedIn, or I would, text, or just write an email to say, hi, how are you? What's going on? Or just ask for lunch. I loved getting lunch or dinner with people and just having a conversation focused in my career and their career, and, what sparks interest in their lives. That's something I've always done. And, after I got to jobs later, so jobs later after Smartling, I again found myself like, how do I get into beauty? How do I combine my skills in that I've learned through tech and beauty? And what is that right role for me? So again, I went back to like, find someone who looks like you, who has a career that you admire, and reach out. So I started saying, okay, how can I expand my network? And I just went on LinkedIn and I started saying, okay, who's a VP of marketing at a beauty company that I have some connection with? Maybe they went to Michigan. Maybe they had a job. Maybe they were at Chanel before, or, are there now? And, who has that job title I want? And I just said, hey, can I have 15 minutes of your time? I just wanted to ask some questions and learn about your career. And I took maybe like 10 calls, or I got 10 hits. I was surprised. When you can find that little connection with someone, people are very, very open to talking to you for 10 minutes. And I did that. And I asked questions. Do I need an MBA? You can just pick people's brain. Like, how did they get where they are, and learn from that? And, that has brought me to the job I have now, which is probably the most fulfilling job I've had, because it does encapsulate all of the things I want to do and in the industry I want. And it comes from that little nugget of stay in touch with people, add people to your network in a meaningful way, and, find people and expand your network. Use LinkedIn. Like that's what it's for. I haven't gotten a job through LinkedIn, but I've gotten it through the network that I've built from making connections, real connections with people.
What, you have always been so good about that and keeping in touch, which is really awesome. Like, you do the heavy lifting around that, right? And just throughout the years. And also it's focused on you, right? So even today, it really is focused on her. We talk about Brittney all the time. So one of the other people that I introduced Brittney to, she's also now one of your mentors, right? And especially during COVID, Brittney set up like a regular meeting
recurring
with us
every
2 months, right? Or something.
Every 2 months.
And we get on the phone for a couple of hours. First, she catches us for like 2 hours, all right? And we mostly talk about her. Okay. And what
so I love this personal advisory board, personal advisory panel. So so it's about you, but would you ask questions specifically, or would it be more of an organic conversation where you're talking about your day or week or a challenge you're having?
It depends. My board is 2 people. It's Karen and this wonderful woman named Leah Holtzman Glass. And, our conversations are probably different than, the new conversations I have, right? So with Karen and Leah, we tend to talk about our life a little bit more. But I don't write down my bullet points, but I'm like, I need to talk to them specifically about these things, right? And then I just try not to interrupt when it's not about me.
No, she comes to these. Okay, listen, Bob. Like, so we'll do a little, whatever is going on in each other's lives. But then she's like, listen, I need to talk about X, Y, and Z, right? And we're like, oh, okay. And we'll talk about it. And, we're trying to give her some advice. And I think that it's this concept of having a network, however large or small it is, people you can go to talk through, these opportunities and challenges, right? So I think at one point, right, there was one job you didn't, were having some issues with,
Yes.
right? And she would come to the meetings and she was just kind of, I'm gonna say belly aching about it, right?
Yes.
A little bit. And we were like, just quit. We'll pay you to quit.
Yeah.
We just wanted her
Yes.
to move on. So it was really kind of, Brittney has like a really strong sense of just commitment and dedication, right? And so she didn't want to leave the job too early, right? You wanted to have a trajectory, that you had built this persona for yourself and this brand, and you wanted to continue that. And so it was really just also just listening sometimes, and giving a little tough love here, or just laughing and just talking through some of those issues. And a lot of things that we did talk about were also like some of the challenges you have as a woman of color
Absolutely.
in these roles. And you have to have, just when you talked about people, reaching out to people who look like you, right? There's that connection, and then you have several other layers of connection. But I also think that, particularly Black women, we know that we don't have a lot of role models. And so we need to like just kind of take each other in sometimes, and just that 10, 15 minutes is not a big deal. But Brittney's 10, 15 minutes has turned to 2 hours.
Yes. Now it's 2 hours, and we talk about current events in the world. We talk about, I bring definitely like it's not a case study, but it's not a case study. Like, how would you handle this situation? And it's really important. It's a really important time for me to talk to my two consiglieres, if you will. They're my career consiglieres, I call them.
Nice.
Because, my parents are both in different careers. And I think most of my family, while very professional in different fields, a lot of them are STEM related fields. So, my parents pushed me into marketing because they were like, oh, you're creative. You should have a job that's going to pay you money. I don't understand that, So I didn't really have like an internal system for like the hard skills and the soft skills in my career. So running things by them, people who have been there before, has really been helpful. For instance, I've been asked in the past, hey, can you do a roundup of what you've covered? And I was like, oh my gosh, or what you've covered in a week. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is another assignment. And I would worry about it. And they were like, okay, this is a good executive skill, which is, a next step for me. Like, I want to be managing teams, and I want to run a P&L, and like, this is a skill set that I thought was an assignment, but it's actually the development of a skill that can help me in the future. And I wouldn't have gotten that from talking to, either my husband or friends, or, people who are outside of the industry and have different goals in their career than I do. So like, we get a lot of meaningful things out of that for sure. So I think having a strong network, that is like your core base of people you've actually worked with is important, for those reasons. And then on top of that, when you're trying to make a change, or you're trying to learn something new, or you're trying to advance in your career, building a network by just reaching out to new people. And to Karen's point, I found, as with the pool of Black women that I was able to find, I've felt a lot of warm reception from, but also Michigan grads, going back into like finding that nugget of connection. And that's how you can get like the 10-minute conversations, and build. Maybe you start there and you build to like having your 3-hour conversations that I've all of it's valuable for sure in different ways.
It's something that Karen and I were exposed to recently was a study of people of color and how they feel in different work environments and how they navigate the bias that is in many work environments. And there was one stat was surprising for me as a middle-aged white guy, is that women of color in particular, it was well over 70%, I believe it was 76%, felt that they had experienced a bias within the workplace in a relatively short period of time. So a question I have for you, Brittney, is have you had those moments over the past, let's say, 5 years or so? And how did you navigate that uncomfortable moment? And do you have any advice for the MVP students, the MVP fellows, we call them, that might be listening to this and hearing your advice?
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. That's almost the story of my life, as it would be for probably I can speak specifically for a Black female who's grown up in America, right? It's different in different places. It manifests differently everywhere.
Right.
But, you kind of have some training. I was fortunate to have parents who were able to kind of train me from their experiences, but I've definitely experienced them at different and varying levels. So because of the experience I'm telling you about, of like kind of growing up hyper aware of your difference, maybe, is there's some things that are internalized, right? And then there are some things that are external. So one, because of the external, you get some internal things, right? That I've had to actively work in the past probably 5 years to maybe not let it hinder me from fully bringing myself to work. So to touch on, to answer your question, some experiences that I've had have been, why is this important to you? Or why are you fighting me on this? At one place I've been, someone said, oh yeah, when I gave you feedback, your response was really aggressive. And I was just like, I'm not an aggressive person because I know I'm not allowed to be. So it really, really hurts to hear things. And also, it doesn't help that that's going to happen to you either. So those kinds of things, I actually did end up having what's considered it's a very, very mild form of PTSD. And workplace trauma is real, and I will tell you. And to get through that, it took my network. I'm a very big advocate for therapy. It took a lot to move past it. And Karen actually brought this up earlier. Both of my, I started talking about some of those words, and again, having your panel is really important, because I was able to bring some of those scenarios to Karen and Leah. I was able to bring some of those scenarios to my panel and ask them, okay, how would you navigate this? What could I have done better? And honestly, their answer for me was nothing. There is nothing you can do. This might not be the best place for you to work. Because, in all of our touch points, I kept bringing up examples like this. Someone calling me aggressive, someone saying that I couldn't, or I wasn't doing well, even though I would bring it to them and they were like, oh, this is great work. There was always, something in the back of my mind that was like, maybe I can do better. Maybe I can learn something better. And it ended up the harsh truth was it wasn't the right place for me. I wasn't able to move past those things. So, I ended up moving on. As an example, it is real. So a piece of advice for me, and I know we've talked about this already, but it's finding a safe space for you to talk to someone who's been there, someone who knows, and have an actual relationship with people who can help you navigate those situations, right? because a lot of people, especially people of color, I know it's ingrained in us, like, don't quit your job before you have something lined up, or it's all in your head. Just stay the course, or, the, which is, it's kind of true, but it's like, you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Having those things internalized in you, is something that I would advise people to try to break free from, because I stayed at the job I'm referring to probably a year and a half, 2 years too long. And was just trying to make it work. So let me try being a little bit more succinct. I think my advice for people experiencing bias, unconscious or not, at work, is to, one, if you have that panel of people who have been your mentors or your sponsors before, run some of the scenarios by them, and ask for honest feedback about your approach, and how you can respond to it in a safe way. If anything, it just gives you confidence for that next day or that next interaction. And two, it is to stay true to yourself, right? And not act out of character when that happens, but keep a list, right? And that list can be used in multiple ways. That list could be used for a conversation with people who are in human resources, or it could be a part of your list for why you don't need to work there anymore. That's my piece of advice.
And I'm glad you walked through that, Brittney, because all of the things that you talked about, like the stuff that's ingrained in us, not move on and not quit and all of that, we are in a different time also, and where, I'm going to say this very cavalierly, I know there's lots of caveats, but we have more choices. Like we're also choosing our workplace. Mm-hmm. Now, when you come out of your, school and you need your first job, you may not feel like you have a ton of choices. But as you progress in your career, really be thoughtful about where you want to work. And also, when you find you've made, not the right choice, or things changed or whatever happened, the place is no longer right for you, not to be afraid to leave, right? To just,
yes,
if you have to, because that, when it's in, like you said, when it's ingrained in you not to leave, it means that you're like, I got to stay, I have to deal with this, but you are actually causing harm to yourself. Yes. If it's affecting your mental well-being, yes. Right? And that's exactly what it was doing for a really long mm-hmm. time. Right? And that's why we were like, oh my God, just leave. Just leave.
I can give you some consulting work.
Please. Because, it was like, I joke about it a little bit, but at the same time, we're watching her go through this trauma, mm-hmm. and it's hurtful to us because,
you've been there.
We've,
yeah, sure.
We've been there. Right. So it's like, God, don't talk about it anymore. Just leave, just go, but she had to do that in her own time. Yeah. And reconcile with that, and I'm very proud of her for doing that. So,
and isn't it true that whether it's personal relationships or work environments or relationships, we tend to hang on a little longer than we probably should have, and
absolutely.
Right, it just is the way it is. It seems, but it sounds like you learned quite a bit, and you leaned on your network, and if we can pivot and talk about the advice that you would give individuals jumping into their first job, right? They're leaving college, or they're leaving an advanced degree, and they're starting their career. What's some of the advice that was given to you that really has been true for you and has worked well for you? And what's some of the advice maybe that you wish that you had heard or had collected as you were graduating? What's some of the advice that you'd give MVP fellows and students entering their career?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but my advice is to, everywhere you go, try to maintain a connection, because it can give you confidence in your next move or help you get to where you want to be, like a genuine connection. So my advice, something I wish I really, really wish I did in school, was have a better relationship with a professor or your favorite instructor or your favorite grad school instructor. Like, have someone, don't start from scratch, practice now. Who is that one person who you can learn from and who you have a good rapport with, and pick one person to stay in touch with. Just do it.
Yeah.
I promise you won't regret it. For the reasons I just listed, building confidence in your skill set, and that you have a landing pad, a soundboard. We need people. People need people. And I think that would probably be the biggest piece of advice. And then I guess there's also, I'm trying to think, like, it's always hardest to get your first job. I feel like, I don't know. Have you both experienced that?
I started working 100 years ago, but nowadays I know it's really, really hard. You have to get internships like a year in advance. That didn't happen.
Yes. I'd say, for your first job, don't be afraid to take a paid internship. Back in my day, they weren't all paid. Now most places they have to pay you. So take anything so you can get your foot in the door and get the experience, even if it isn't quite the job you want. Your first one, like, take it from me, is not always going to be your end all be all, but you'll always learn something from it. And my first internship turned into a lifetime of a network and confidence building, and foundational for my career today in every way possible.
That's great. Karen, should we do some rapid fire questions?
Yes. Wait, can I do my
do a wrap up. Sure. Yeah.
Am I being too long-winded?
No. Karen just does this really wonderful wrap up near the end to talk about the key lessons and takeaways.
Cool.
I don't know if it's wonderful, but we'll
I've been taking notes here, so if you've heard clickety clack, it's me taking notes, not doing email. Yeah.
Okay, so here are some highlights from what you said. Keep updating your resume, right? So one of the things you talked about is you had applied to Chanel right out of college. You didn't get that first role, but you just kept updating it, which is, I think, a really key thing that people need to do.
Keep up with it.
Keep up with it. Even if you don't get that perfect role and taking different roles, take pieces of your role, right? Think about how pieces of your role can contribute to your long-term goal.
Absolutely.
Right? So what can you learn from every single one? Right? We talked a lot about your personal advisory board. Build one, no matter how small or large, like you can grow it, right? And you talked about picking up people as you go, right? Which just keep adding people. A big thing is keeping in touch with people, right? And being creative in your outreach as well, but keeping in touch, little touches here, text, asking them out for lunch or a drink or whatever the case may be, right? And in particular, stay in touch with the people that you worked with, right? You never know if they'll be the gift that keeps on giving.
Absolutely. Who said those things?
I can't. Yeah.
All right, now for your quick words of wisdom, right? From courtesy of Bob. I'll hang
just
back.
some quick answers with 2 or 3 questions here. All right. What is your greatest superpower, and how do you use it?
Oh my gosh. I know. Oh my gosh. I had an answer in my mind, but okay. I think one of my greatest superpowers is communication. And I think the way I use it is I am able to tailor questions feedback or whatever it is to the person I'm talking to, because I've built some sort of connection with them.
Beautiful. And tell us about one of or your greatest weakness rather, and how do you navigate that?
Oh my gosh. One of my greatest weaknesses is probably that I don't like being told things I already know. That's my weakness. And the way I navigate that is, one, acknowledging that. And what I try to do is accept all feedback as constructive, right?
Yeah.
So even if I already know that, I will kind of rehash it to myself and try to learn something new or find a new take on what I thought I already knew.
Does that make sense? It does make sense. Yeah. Thank you. What was your favorite subject in school?
I just loved school so much. The whole thing from top to bottom. I know I'm probably weird in that sense, but I would be at school all day. If I had to pick one subject, what would that be? You know what? It might be. It depends on the year. Bob, I'm very indecisive.
Your senior year.
Okay, my favorite subject would be English. I'd say I loved, writing papers because I had time, to really sink into it. And I loved coming back to that thesis. That was great. But if I had to pick a favorite class, which I know you didn't ask me, if I had to pick a favorite class, it would be this honors U.S. history. Mr. Rosati, shout out to you wherever you were, because we would read the history book, we would write about the history we just learned, and we would watch a movie that brought context and reality to what we read, whether or not what we read was actually entirely historically accurate, it just brought context.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So, Brittney, in a wrap up here, what's your why? Tell us what's the motivator for you every day to do your best work? What's your why in life?
Honestly, the why for me is, to be honest, my why and what motivates me is that I know I'm my ancestors' wildest dreams. That's always been a motivator for me, whether it's work or, everyday life. And that kind of pulls into my career, because in fragrance and beauty, I haven't always seen a lot of people who look like me. So my why is to every day be the representation I wish I had.
Fantastic. Yeah.
I love it.
Brittney, thanks for coming on the show, telling us more about yourself, your motivators, and it's inspiring to get to meet and talk with you more. And thanks for the advice about building a network and a panel and staying in touch with those individuals to help you propel in your career. It's great advice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brittney. Always good to talk
This
to
was
you.
so much fun.
See you at our next
You guys
meetup.
really made me think. I appreciate you guys. I'll see you in the next meetup, Bob. You're joining the club.
You invite me, I'll be there.
You're about to be drafted.
I'll be there.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Brittney.
Bye, Brittney.
Bye.